Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 15, The Decided Ones of Jupiter the Thunderer from A History of Secret Societies by Arkon Daraul. Chapter 14, The Decided Ones of Jupiter, the Thunderer. The life of one of the most celebrated of Italian brigands runs through the story of the Lodge of Jupiter the Thunderer, which came into lusty being after 1815, when bands of outlaws were terrorizing Calabria and the Abruzzi. Ciro Annunchiarico was his name, and he had placed himself at the head of a cutthroat band, unable to live in normal society because of their crimes. For some time, the brigands were able to operate unmolested, but when the government decided to take stern measures against them, Ciro realized that there might be scope for a general confederation of all outlaws. Ciro himself had little to lose, being under sentence of at least perpetual imprisonment for murder. He was nobody's fool, and had no hope of being able to overcome the royal forces, but he felt that he could muster sufficient forces to gain favorable terms when it came to the point of negotiation. His was not the most powerful gang, but Ciro had a strong personality. The Vardarelli bandits, he knew, were already so powerful that they would make the best allies, and he accordingly invited them and the chiefs of other groups to a conference about the end of 1816 or the beginning of 1817. As a priest, he himself celebrated a mass for the combined forces in a deserted chapel just before the deliberations commenced. Gaetano Vardarelli, head of the other important group, felt that such an alliance might attract too much unwelcome attention from the authorities. In point of fact, he was himself at that very moment in the service of King Ferdinand, for he had made his peace with him on favorable terms. At the same time, he was prepared to listen to any proposition which might give him greater profits than his current arrangements. He awaited Ciro's suggestions. Ciro was both a desperado and a man of learning, brought up in comfortable circumstances. He was early earmarked for the church, came of a respectable family of farmers, and had an uncle who was known as something of a savant. The youth began his terrible career through killing a young man of the Montolesi family in a jealous rage. Whipping himself into a sense of hatred for every relation of his victim, he pursued everyone of the name of Montolesi until only one remained alive. This worthy only escaped by shutting himself up in his house and staying there for several years. Even when Ciro was killed, he refused for some time to believe it. Such was the terror which his enemy inspired in him. After 4 years in prison, Ciro escaped and started his career as chief of a society of murderers. Some of his exploits cannot be recorded in a book for general circulation. His more ordinary activities were sanguinary enough. Such things as the ravaging of a woman at Martano and stealing from her 96,000 ducats were the normal routine with him. He kept in continual correspondence with a large number of brigands, and a letter to him was enough to send him off to murder almost anyone designated, providing that the price offered was sufficient. When asked by the commission, which eventually condemned him, how many people he had personally killed, he said that he could not remember, but it might be 60 or 70. In addition to being reasonably cunning, Ciro was an expert marksman and always rode a first-class horse. Even when betrayed, he outmaneuvered ambushes by forced marches of 30 and 40 miles. Such was his luck and judgment, so many were his seemingly miraculous escapes from justice, that he was considered to be a magician, and this was an impression which he sedulously fostered. Nobody dared to say anything against him, let alone curse him, in spite of the Italian penchant for such outbursts, because if they did so, a demon would certainly inform him of it. He was also of an unusually loose moral character and carried a portfolio of very free French songs, which was with him when he was eventually arrested. Although an ordained priest, he seemed to think that he was the only genuine one, because although he would celebrate Mass, he declared that all others were impostors. Missionaries, he stated in a published paper, were preaching untruths, and he forbade them to function in the villages of the countryside. Ciro amused himself with whims from time to time. When he was being pursued by a General D'Octavio and 1,000 men, he jumped down upon him from a garden wall, armed to the teeth. "I will spare you this time," he told the terrified commander, "but if you continue to hunt me, I shall not be so indulgent." The reason why he spared the general, he told his cronies, was that it was better to be hunted by a frightened man than a new and possibly unfrightenable one who might replace him if he were murdered. He is described as being of an engaging personality, pleasant in appearance, strong, fond of women. At the time of his capture, he had mistresses in all the towns of the province through which he was restlessly ranging. This was the adventurer who placed himself at the head of the secret society called the Patriotti Europei, and later another called the Decisi. These organizations were strengthened by the fact that they were able to corrupt minor functionaries, and also because they found enough priests to attach to all their camps and detachments, giving them a sort of implied importance or regularity. The archpriest Ciro Cicilio of Cacamola, Vergine of Corigliano, and Legheri filled important situations in the sect. The signature of the last was found under the patents in quality of captain reporter. The archpriest Zurlo of Valsano celebrated Mass on Christmas Eve, armed to the teeth. Some parts of the country were under their complete control. In other places, they ranged the countryside in guerrilla fashion, dressed in fantastic costumes which served to increase their supernatural reputation. In more settled areas, hired or sworn secret assassins lurked and watched for the moment to sink their knives into the breasts of persons sentenced to death by the Confederation of Secret Societies. Between December 1817 and January 1818, the total number of members, all on the active list, was estimated at 20,000 men. Some lived, like the thugs of India, seemingly respectable lives. Others lived irregular and bandit-like but settled lives, forcing everyone in their home villages to sign over their property to them at the point of a poignard. The secret society caucus was thus arranged. Lodges were known as decisi, decisions, of the Order of the Decided. These were the assemblies of the reformed European patriots. The society was divided into camps of 300 or 400 men and squadrons of 40 to 60 strong. As their numbers increased, the aim clearly became one of general revolution. Proper military formations of infantry and cavalry were organized, drilling and exercises held. Each member had a patent decorated with terrible symbols and inscribed somewhat as follows. The Salentine Decision. Salutation, number 5 Grand Masons. The decision of Jupiter, the Thunderer, hopes to make war against the tyrants of the universe, etc. The mortal Gaetano Caffieri is a brother decided number 5, belonging to the decision of Jupiter, the Thunderer, spread over the face of the earth by his decision, has had the pleasure to belong to this Salentine Republican decision. We invite, therefore, all philanthropic societies to lend their strong arm to the same and to assist him in his wants, he having come to the decision that he will obtain liberty or death. Dated this day, the 29th of October, 1817. Signed, Pietro Gargaro, the decided Grand Master, number 1. Vito Di Serio, second decided, Gaetano Caffieri, Registrar of the Dead. Part of the document is written in blood. A proper register of the dead and the manner in which they were killed was maintained, and the names inscribed thereon, together with blasphemies and infernal projects. The killings themselves, when possible, were carried out according to a special ritual. At the signal of the first blast of a trumpet, they unsheathed their poignards. They aimed them at their victims at the second blast. At the third, they gradually approached their weapons to his breast with real enthusiasm, and plunged them into the body at the fourth signal. 4 dots appear under the name of Gargaro. These indicate his power to pass sentence of death. If these stops were included thus in a letter from the decision, it meant that the addressee was automatically sentenced to death if he did not obey the order. If there were no dots, then a milder punishment, such as laying waste his fields, would ensue. The symbols of this society include a thunderbolt darting from a cloud and striking a crown and tiara, the fasces and the cap of liberty upon a death's head between 2 axes, a skull and crossbones with the motto sadness, death, terror and mourning. The colors are yellow, red and blue. All this may seem very melodramatic, but the fact that the decision meant business and carried out its threats tended to outweigh such superficial criticism. Certificates cost a great deal of money, and these fees provided the society with a considerable amount of its funds. The first really determined attack upon the secret society took place in the summer of 1817. Armed with unlimited powers and 1,200 Germans, Albanians and Swiss, completely reliable and unshakable mercenaries, General Church set off for the mountains. In many places, nobody would give any information. It is reported that in 5 important areas, only 1 monk out of all the population bowed to the general. In some other places, however, the inhabitants were a little more communicative when they realized that this was at last a determined effort to flush the rebels. Ciro, surrounded by moving columns of troops acting as beaters, is reported to have said, "This general is a different man from those who have been sent against me before. I have made fools of many generals, French, Italian, and Neapolitan, but this one will end by making a fool of me." He tried to flee in a ship at Brindisi, but was recognized and resolved to stand and fight at the fortified town of St. Marzano. The town was taken after some resistance, and those who had defended it were taken into custody. Ciro's standard and other objects were captured and sent to the king, but the bandit chief escaped. He now took refuge in a fortified farmhouse, but was tracked down by Church's troops, who had been threatened with severe penalties by the general should they fail to find him. With 3 companions, he held out for a day and a night. Tormented by thirst, he eventually surrendered. Searched, he was found to have poison on him and said that his companions had prevented him from taking it. He pleaded for his subordinates, saying that they had been forced to become bandits. When sentenced to death and offered the consolations of religion, the renegade priest said, "Let us leave alone this prating. We are of the same profession. Don't let us laugh at one another." As he was led to execution by Lieutenant Fonsemort, he remarked that he would have liked to make him a captain, and the scene is described thus. The streets were filled with people. There were spectators even on the roofs. They all preserved a gloomy silence. When he arrived at the place of execution, he was asked to kneel. He did so, but was told that bandits were shot in the back. As he turned, he asked a priest to stand back in case the bullets hit him by mistake. 21 musket balls hit him, and still he did not die. This fact is confirmed by all the officers and soldiers present at his death. "As soon as we perceived," said a soldier very gravely, "that he was enchanted, we loaded his own musket with a silver ball, and that destroyed the spell." On the following day, 10 of the chiefs of the Decisi were shot at the same place. None showed any repentance, and the most lurid days of the secret society were brought to a close. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.